Welcome to Scrub In, a podcast powered by Bay Health. I am your host, Sarah Beebe.
And I am your co-host, Tyler Cody.
Thank you for joining us as we ask ourselves to scrub in
and talk more about our why behind the healthcare uniform. Welcome to Scrub In, a podcast powered by Bay Health. I am your host, Tyler Cody.
And I'm your co-host, Sarah Beebe.
Thank you for joining us as we ask ourselves here at Bay Health to scrub in and talk more about our why behind the healthcare uniform. Before we scrub into our episode, we want to share our quote. There is always light if we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it, from Amanda Gorman.
So today's guest is Harley Ricketts, and she is an ED nurse at Bay Health Sussex campus. And we're going to be talking to her about her why today. And so, Harley, you started as a nurse right at the beginning of the pandemic. So tell us a little bit about how you became a nurse and what's your why?
Thanks for having me. Like I said, I'm Harley. Well, I became a nurse. I was that little girl that always was like, I'm going to be a nurse. I know I'm supposed to be a nurse. Even my mom is a nurse, but she wasn't always a nurse. She became a nurse when I was about 8. But even before that, I was like, I'm meant to be a nurse. I was that little kid like bandaging things up and just was all about it. So I went to school. Went to school in Ohio, got my degree. It was honestly the best decision I ever made. Like, I started nursing and I was like, this is it. Like, this was made for me. Every single step of the way, I was like, oh, this next class, this is awesome. I'm going to learn this. This is awesome. I never really loved learning. It wasn't for me. I was not the kid who was like, let's go to school. It wasn't it. But in nursing school, I was like, I can't wait to learn this next thing. I can't wait to this next thing. Oh, cool. I get to see patients. I get to do this, take care of them. It was honestly the best experience I ever did in my life. And then my senior year of nursing school, that's when COVID started, and they were like, you have to go home for a little bit, but don't worry, you'll come back. And I went home and I never went back. I did my last year of clinicals online with virtual patients, and then took my NCLEX, and then I started in med-surg. And that's where I kind of learned how to be a nurse. I learned what the heck I was doing. I learned how to take care of patients, time management, medications. It was truly a blessing just to be able to start and learn from all of these amazing nurses who were going through something similar to me. Like, I had just started. I didn't really understand how to even be a nurse. And now on top of that, I have to learn how to be a nurse in a pandemic where people are getting sick and people are dying, and you just weren't taught those things in nursing school. They kind of taught you like a brief thing of like, this is how you take care of patients, but no one was like, you're going to see this every day, all the time. And no one prepares you for that. So I did med-surg for about a year where I, became and learned how to be a nurse. And then I went to the ICU, and that was in the second round of the pandemic where it honestly was the same thing as the first one, where it just was unbearable. Like, you just were always seeing patients sick. The only difference now was when I was on med-surg, I would send them to the ICU when they kind of needed to be more oxygenated, they needed to be intubated, all of that. When I'm in the ICU and I'm seeing these patients being intubated, I'm seeing their families sit there and have to make these decisions, and these patients just saying their like last words before we intubate them. And it was hard. It was really, really hard, but it was a great experience. Like, in the ICU is truly where I learned like why I want to be a nurse. Like, and when you're faced with like death and you're faced with hardship nonstop, it's like, how can you find these like little glimmers of light in this experience? But I think for me, like having to be that hand to hold, like at one point we weren't even allowed to have family members in their rooms. They weren't allowed to have anyone. They had to make the decisions in the waiting room, and like the only person they had was me or the tech, just to hold their hand or give them a phone to make their last call before we intubated them. Like, that was my why. Like, that made me realize, like, this is why I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to be that person for the people who couldn't help themselves. They couldn't take care of themselves. Like, I wanted to be that helping hand, and it just flourished while I was in the ICU. It was kind of just this beautiful thing of like, wow, I'm this person that can be there for them when their family can't. The person who you're supposed to have at your bedside, now I need to figure out how to be that role. And it was really just a beautiful situation and a beautiful way of like relearning nursing and relearning my love for nursing. It was actually really crazy.
That is so touching. That is really
Yeah.
touching. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of some of my experiences as well. And you are so right. That is just the highest emotional state that you can be in when you're holding that person's hand, when no one else is there to do that for them. And that's beautiful. It really is.
Thank you.
Yeah, you both have that connection of being ICU nurses, and my connection to that is I was an educator during the pandemic, and I was working in a university here in Delaware, and we were sending everybody home on spring break, and thought that they were going to come back, and we had to pivot so quickly and make those decisions about how we were going to educate and get those last few hours of clinical in, and do it virtually. And so how did you feel becoming that new nurse in the height of the pandemic? I mean, did you feel like you had all the resources you needed coming out of nursing school, or what did that feel like?
I did. I don't think that anybody who leaves nursing school ever prepares to be a brand new nurse in the pandemic, but I think my support system at Bay Health was actually really, really, really amazing. Like, I was put into this nurse residency where I met people like Erica, who after a hard day, I could literally just sit in her office and be like, I just need to vent. I just need to tell you, like, I'm trying to figure out my whole idea of being a nurse. And now on top of that, I have to figure out BiPAPs and oxygenating and nasal cannulas, and when did they go to the high flow, and when do I call respiratory? When do I do all of this? Like, it's all part of nursing, but it was so prevalent during COVID that it was like, you had to just learn so much more so fast. And I think people like Erica or my team that I had on the 6th floor, or like residency program, like, I would sit in a room with all these brand new nurses, and they would know exactly how I felt. They would know exactly what it was like to be like, we don't know what we're doing. And now on top of that, we have to figure out how to be a new nurse and figure out how to take care of these really, really sick patients, these high acuity patients that, like, you didn't always take care of. You didn't always, especially fresh out of nursing, like, you try to, like, teach them slowly and then start adding in high acuity. But when everyone on the floor is a high acuity patient, how can you do that? It's just impossible. So that's where, like, my team on the floor and my residency program, and, like, teaching me, like, I have other nurses, like, that residency program put me in a room with how many other new nurses. I was like, these are your resources, these are your people. And I think that was such a beautiful thing. That's exactly what we needed, because then when I was standing in a room by myself or standing in the hallway by myself, I'm like, hey, I remember you. I just, we just had a class together. Or Eric was in our office, and it was like, hey, I just need to tell you, I just need to vent to you, because this was a hard day. And I just think my residency program and Bay Health really, like they just prepared us in such a beautiful way that nobody was prepared to prepare anyone for. Like, no one was like, oh, we're going to teach these new nurses how to be new nurses in a pandemic. No one was ready for that. And these people were struggling themselves. Like, these are nurses who are struggling to do everything too. And, like, for them to be like, here, I'm going to support you. And while I'm supporting myself, it was a really, really great experience being a new nurse at Bay Health. Honestly, I feel like I was so supported.
And for our listeners that are not from Bay Health, I want to give a little background. So we have an accredited nurse residency program that all of our new nurses are a part of for almost an entire year. Erica being one of our nurse educators here at Bay Health. And you create a cohort every month. We have a new cohort of residents that walk through together. They're from all different departments. But you do get this group of new nurses that you get to be a part of, as well as your team that you're on your own unit. And not only do you get support on your unit, but then you also have the nurse educators that you can go in and check in with, and kind of have somebody who's off the unit that might be a little safer to talk to in times like that. And so it sounds like that really worked well for you. And I hear that feedback from other new nurses as well.
I really can't imagine what it must have been like for you entering your career fresh out of school, right into a pandemic where you were expected to take care of patients at that level of acuity.
Yeah.
Like, I can only imagine if I started my career with that level of acuity, I would have been shocked. I would have been scared. Like, that would have been really difficult for me to manage. And it speaks to your resiliency. It really does.
Yeah, I think it really has made me the nurse that I am today. Like, My mom is also a nurse, like I said, and she used to joke and she'd be like, the nurses that are going to come out of this, like that started in the pandemic, like they're going to be unstoppable. And I just feel like I learned so much. Like it put me at like my knowledge, like the amount that I felt like I grew as a new nurse in just that 1 year of nursing, of like the hardest year of nursing, like I feel like it made me just a totally different nurse than I thought I would ever be. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to come out of such a hard thing. Like it really is. It's insane. I never thought I would be the nurse I am today. Like to be able to say like I can take care of these patients and they're gonna be okay, or I can take care of these patients and I can help them through this process. I think it's really a crazy situation.
I love that. I love that. We so often hear like, oh, those new nurses during the pandemic. But I love that your mom said that the nurses that come out of the pandemic, those new nurses, are going to be unstoppable. Because I agree. You not only had to learn all of the skills of a new nurse, but you also had to learn all of the skills of the experienced nurses, because you all were in the same boat there in the beginning. I know I've talked to nurses and nurse practitioners that were new during that period of time, and they were like, we all were on the same playing field to some respect, because every week something was changing, and every day something was changing, and you were the only one still coming to work when everybody else was making banana bread or watching Netflix or something like that. And so it really did I imagine it probably really bonded you together with some nurses that maybe you wouldn't have bonded with.
Yeah, I definitely agree 100%. I think that sometimes when you're a new nurse, you like look at those experienced nurses and you're like, we have nothing in common. And you know what I mean? Like the pandemic did put us all on the same field where we all have no clue what we're doing. Tomorrow it could be a new thing. The next week it could spread differently. The next week we're going to have more sick patients, and it's like all of us didn't know what we were doing. Do we wear a mask? Do we wear double masks? Are we supposed to wear special masks? Like all of us were just as confused as each other. And I think it really did bond us in a way that like, if I didn't start in a pandemic, I don't think that I would have had those connections with older nurses and wiser nurses that I think really did help me.
And you probably still have those bonds today.
Oh,
you
yeah.
still have those connections with those people that you established, at the very beginning. And that'll carry you throughout your career.
Yeah, definitely. You can't, like people say, when I started nursing school, they were like, these people in this room are going to be your friends. And like, you can't beat a nurse friend. Like they get you. They know exactly what you're saying. You can talk about anything at the table. You can talk about anything at lunch. They get you. They know exactly what you're saying. Like you can say the cringiest thing and they're like, oh, I get it. That's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm like, you can't beat a nurse friend. It's 100% exactly what you need.
Well, and I find that I gravitate toward, like in a group, I gravitate towards the nurse in the group. Like if there's another nurse in the group, it doesn't matter what kind of background we have, or like, I do OB or did OB and they may do ED, but we find a common bond and we're like, I got you, And so it's totally different than, some other professions. 'Cause I really do believe that we are defined as nurses. Like that's who we are. And so, and not many professions can you say, that's who you are, but we will forever define ourselves as being a nurse. When they write our obituaries, they will say, Tyler was a nurse, and then the rest about you. But like, hopefully no time soon, but just, but that will be like, that will define you no matter what other jobs you may have. You will always be a nurse as opposed to working as a nurse.
It's kind of like you're never coming off the clock because it is a definition of you, Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're always thinking about it in some way.
Yeah, definitely. You'd be like, you leave and you're like, oh, I wonder how that patient's doing, or I wonder how my coworkers are tonight. Like you never stop thinking about your job ever. I go home and I'm like, listen, I had the best shift and I just want to talk about my shift and I'm going to be back in the morning at 3 p.m. Like you never stop thinking about nursing. It's insane. It's just who you are. Like nurses are made to be nurses. It's not a job that you choose to do. Like no one's like, I want to be a nurse today. Like no, it's like who you are. It's in your heart. Like that's your job.
And I think that's valued by our community too, because they know, our friends and family that live out in the community, they know that we're committed to the profession. They know that we never stop nursing.
Well, and that's why like I don't know about you, but I'm always the one that somebody calls like, hey, this just happened. And, would you mind looking at it? Or I find that I'm still a nurse, like at home. Do you have moments where you are a nurse outside of Bay Health?
100%. Like, I'm literally my family's nurse. Like, I graduated nursing school. One of my friends, he was just like, and now we have a nurse for life. Like, you can't not be a nurse in your family. Like, everybody, you're the first person to call. Like, I just had my friend call, and she was like, my daughter has an ingrown toenail. I'm like, that's not really my expertise, but I guess I could help you. She's like, it's red and inflamed. And I'm like, all right, antibiotics. Like, you literally just go right into nurse mode. Like, there's no break in between the two. Like, someone asks you and you're like, your brain's just spiraling. Like, what's going on? What are they saying? What's the next step for them? Like, you definitely are always a nurse, especially when you're the nurse in the family. Yeah, you're never going to stop being a nurse.
Yeah. I love to send photos too.
Yeah.
They love
Definitely.
Oh, the photos for sure.
100%.
I've gotten some really beautiful poison ivy photos of like whole
gosh.
bodies, and I'm like,
Now you're
really?
making me
Why
itch.
are you showing me this?
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what profession you are. Like, my brother just had a baby, and I'm like, I've never had a baby. I've never birthed a baby, nothing. And he's like, so do you know this? I'm like, dude, that's not me. I work in the ER. Like, no, sorry. And you're still trying to figure out. You're like Googling it, and you're like, I've got you. You're like asking other nurses, asking your OB friend, like, hey, you got this answer. So you bring everyone in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'm the opposite. So I was OB, and then I was a nurse midwife for a number of years, and so I know babies. And right now, I have my dad living with me, and he has a wound vac, and I'm like, I have become a wound nurse. So I go home, and I am a wound nurse. I had to YouTube video how to change a wound vac. I knew it, and I remembered it from when I used to be in the ICU, and it came back to me, and I knew the principles and all that kind of stuff. So I felt safe doing it, but at the same time, I became a wound nurse for my family, and so it's just so cool that we can do that for our family and friends outside of here as well.
Kind of keeps us always learning too.
Oh yeah,
because we're curious.
Yeah,
we want those text messages. We want to know what's going on.
I live for them.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Even if I roll my eyes, I'm like, yes, please call me about that. Yes,
no, I'm the exact same way. I'm like, what do you got going on? Can I help? What are you doing?
Yeah,
just checking in on them.
Yes.
Yeah. So now that you are, we're coming out of the pandemic, but I'm sure that some of that weight that you carried in the beginning is still there. I think all nurses are carrying a little bit of trauma, whether we want to use that term or not. But how do you mentioned, a glimmer of light. What do you use as that glimmer of light for you when when you come home from a hard day like that?
Yeah. So I was lucky. I was one of the few, my mom was an ED nurse during the pandemic also. So I definitely had her as a resource of someone to be like, just go home and cry to, or just to be like, I just lost all my patients today, every single one. And then she would understand what I'm saying. It was really a beautiful thing to have her. My mom is my best friend, but she truly became my best friend during COVID because I could go to her and she knew exactly what I'm saying. Of course, my wife and my dogs were 100% my light too. I loved going home to her and just looking at her and be like, I love you so much and you're here and I never want to lose you. You forget that even exists sometimes because everyone, it didn't matter what age. I went home to her and I was like, I just love you so much and I want you here. And my dogs, they would lick on me and I'm like, I don't care. I want you guys all here. I know what it feels like to lose people. And I want you guys all here. But I went to my mom and my mom was like, I understand. I get it. I saw that patient in the ED before we sent them to you. I 100% understand what you're saying. And I just, even if we sat there in silence, if we didn't say a word, me and her had this connection. And I think it was this really lucky light that I had that I needed. As a new nurse and as a nurse in the pandemic, I needed that person to be like, I understand what you're saying and I completely get it. And I think that those, my family and having my mom and just being able to be because there were people I couldn't see during the pandemic, my grandparents who I didn't want to get sick, who I was always around COVID. So she has respiratory issues and I didn't want to get her sick. So to have those people that I was like, okay, I'm safe with and I can go home to, and I need those people. I think those people were my light, like my sister and my brother and my mom and my wife and my dogs. Like, those were the people you go home to and you're like, thank God you're here, because I just need a smile. I just need a lick on the cheek. I just need a hand to hold. I just need to know that you guys are here. And like, those people were truly like my light and my glimmer that I needed at the end of the day, that I needed, and that I still use now. Even though we're not in the height of the pandemic, I still use those same exact resources that I go home and I'm like, I had the worst day, but now that I see you, like, it makes the day 10 times better. Like, I just, you get exactly what I needed. And I just think it's, that my family and just having my mom who understood exactly what I was going through was really just exactly what I needed, and exactly what I need now. Like, I'm 3 years in, and I still some days I'm like, oh, I had the worst shift, or I'm the worst nurse, or, you know what I mean? And you need that person to be like, you're not the worst. It's not the worst. You're going to be okay. You're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to do your job again, and you're just going to do better, and it's going to be better. Like, you need that person. And I think that's exactly what I had and what I have now. And it's really helpful.
It's honestly a blessing.
Yeah.
You've got me like glimmering over here, thinking about your glimmer.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I agree. I'm touched by hearing the support that you had, which, not that it necessarily felt easy, but it's just nice to know that, that was out there for you. Yeah.
It's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
I'm lucky. I really am.
Yes, you are. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Harley, so much for sharing your story and sharing your light and inspiring us about what it truly means to be a part of a team. And
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
No, I just wanted to thank you so much for having me, and just allowing me to share with fellow nurses and fellow Bay Health coworkers. I think it's exactly what we need. We need to be able to connect, and I think sometimes just driving on the way home from a 12-hour shift, or just getting somewhere, being able to listen and be like, wow, I understand exactly what she's saying. I feel supported. I feel just informed. I feel like I have people at Bay Health. I think this is exactly what we needed, and I really appreciate it, and thank you guys for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Scrub In.
Join us for our next episode by subscribing to this podcast and telling your friends to do the same.
Click plus or follow so you don't miss an episode. Don't forget to keep up with us all on social media channels by following @BayHealth.
And remember, there is a why behind every healthcare uniform.